So Jaime Munguia dispatched of John Ryder over the weekend. Shout out to Gabe Rosado on the DAZN team because he called it right on the money. He said Munguia would take him out in 9 rounds, and that's exactly what happened. So Munguia did a better job, certainly on paper, than Canelo Alvarez did. And these fights were back-to-back. It's not like Munguia fought Ryder several years after Canelo beat him. Therefore, it's fair to compare the two performances. But what does this mean? Munguia doing a better job than Canelo? Is it down to Canelo underperforming? Is it a matter of Munguia improving dramatically in a short space of time? Is it a matter of styles make fights? Or is it a matter of John Ryder being physically and perhaps mentally compromised after the punishment he took in the Canelo fight? Personally, I suspect it's a combination of all these things. But certainly if we compare the styles of Canelo Alvarez and Jaime Munguia, Canelo, as we know, is not the most active fighter in the ring. He doesn't have the highest work rate, and that's down to his very muscular physique and the fact that every punch he throws is a hard punch. That's his style. And when you've got that kind of build and that kind of style, it's very energy sapping for you to fight that way. As a result, he takes long breaks in fights where he's just not punching, and that gives his opponents time to recover sometimes from being hurt, etc. And certainly that was the case against John Ryder. He did put Ryder down heavily. He hurt him, he busted him up. But there were moments where Canelo was just not punching. He was very inactive, and that allowed Ryder back into the fight. Whereas in the Jaime Munguia-John Ryder fight, Munguia kept up a high work rate, something he's famous for. He didn't give John Ryder an opportunity to rest. Now, I would say that Munguia appears to have improved. One of the things that we've long criticized Munguia for, I think most of us in the boxing community, is his poor defense. In this fight against John Ryder, he did get hit here and there, but it wasn't to the extent that, let's say, he got hit against Derevyanchenko and many other fighters in the past. Does that mean he's improved his defense? Well, possibly, but not necessarily, because Munguia in the past has had most issues against aggressive fighters. People like Derevyanchenko, people who storm forward and throw a lot of shots at him and put it on him. They force defensive mistakes out of him, whereas John Ryder really wasn't doing that. His pressure was very occasional, very sporadic. Then he would get on the back foot or in the middle of the ring and box at long range for a bit before going back on the inside sporadically again. He wasn't applying enough consistent pressure, as I say, to force defensive mistakes out of Munguia. But Munguia was applying enough consistent pressure to force defensive mistakes out of John Ryder. And he was more consistent than Canelo with his punch output. Now, he dropped John Ryder a couple times in the early rounds. They weren't particularly heavy knockdowns. The second one, some would argue, wasn't a knockdown at all. I'm not saying it wasn't a knockdown at all. I'm saying some people are going to argue that. But certainly the third and fourth knockdowns were absolutely legit. Nobody can possibly argue otherwise. Now, John Ryder's always been relatively solid in the punch resistance department, but he was down 4 times here against Munguia as opposed to only once against Canelo. Does that mean Munguia hit so much harder than Canelo? Or does it mean that John Ryder's punch resistance has deteriorated as a result of the punishment he took in the Canelo fight? Or again, is it just down to the fact that Jaime Munguia hit John Ryder more often, didn't allow him time to recover? As I said at the start, I think it's a combination of several factors. Munguia, as Barry Jones was pointing out on the DAZN broadcast, was thinking about his work a bit more than we're used to seeing, but I thought that was the case even when he was being trained by Eric Morales. Because for this fight, he was with Freddie Roach, but for the past couple years, he's been with Morales, and I saw an improvement in Munguia's shape. I'm not talking about his physical shape, I'm talking about his boxing stance, holding a construct together. Now again, against Derevyanchenko, that construct was tested and it kind of became sloppy. Once again, that's a stylistic thing. When people put it on Munguia, he has problems. He likes to be the one putting it on you, not the other way around. Now he's shown a good chin, he's shown heart, but he just seems to struggle with aggressive opponents. And it was kind of curious that John Ryder didn't dedicate himself to all-out attack. Surely he would have seen these other fights where Munguia struggled against aggressive opponents. And John Ryder has fought that way in the past. Like when he fought Callum Smith, he was all-out attack. But of course, that was several years ago when John Ryder was a much younger and much fresher fighter. At the age of 35, long, hard career, plenty of punishment. Maybe he just didn't have it in the gas tank. Whatever the case may be, Munguia controlled the action for the most part. There were moments where John Ryder had success, but they were relatively fleeting. Munguia was able to apply pressure, not reckless pressure that we've seen, certainly before he was with Morales, but more thoughtful pressure, and he broke John Ryder down gradually. That's literally what happened. Ryder came back in a couple of the middle rounds, might have been round 6, 7, landed a few jabs, but nothing of any real consequence. Perhaps enough to take a couple rounds. But of course, in the 9th, when Munguia got through some big shots again, he got through some big shots in the 8th, had John Ryder on the ropes. But in the 9th, he got through with more punches, managed to score 2 knockdowns, and ultimately John Ryder's corner, Tony Sims, decided to end the fight. They were waving the towel, which the referee didn't actually see. They had to ring the bell in order to get the referee's attention because there was such pandemonium in the arena. The crowd were making so much noise. The referee couldn't hear John Ryder's corner trying to get his attention. So they rang the bell so the referee would know that Ryder's team is stopping it. So Munguia moves to 43-0, 34 KOs. He's now 27 years of age, and many people are calling this a statement performance by him, a coming-of-age performance, a performance worthy, in the view of some people, not necessarily me, of a shot at Canelo Alvarez. Now, up to this point, I've never been convinced that Jaime Munguia could beat Canelo. I'm still not convinced. I think he makes far too many mistakes. He's never been in there with a guy who hits as hard as Canelo Alvarez, who's as accurate, and of course, who's as experienced and accomplished. There's so much for Canelo to feed off of with Jaime Munguia. He's a guy that's not shy to let his hands go. And Canelo Alvarez is a fantastic counterpuncher. Is that a fight Canelo really wants right now, though? Not that he's got anything to fear with Munguia, but he's said in the past that he doesn't want to fight fellow Mexicans, even though he's fought loads of Mexicans in his career. But he's been saying that over the past couple years, more in relation to David Benavidez, who's also a Mexican. Well, a Mexican-American if you want to get technical, but Canelo has been referring to Benavidez as a Mexican, saying he doesn't want to fight a countryman, right? Well, if he's saying that about Benavidez, then surely that would apply to Munguia as well. So if he were to go ahead and fight Munguia, then that would eliminate his excuse for not fighting Benavidez. You see what I'm saying? So will Canelo decide to go down that road? There's rumors that Canelo is apparently going to fight Jamal Charlo. And of course, he's coming off a win over Jamal's brother, Jamel, in a very, very disappointing affair. To me, that would be an absolute liberty by Canelo if he were to fight the other Charlo brother next, when David Benavidez has been waiting for his shot for ages. The WBC, aka We Be Crooks, are running a witness protection program for some of their champions. It's terrible. Now, of course, Canelo Alvarez has got a very decorated record. He's fought loads of top fighters over the years. He's achieved so much. But one of the things, at least from my perspective, that the sanctioning bodies are supposed to achieve is a merit-based title system whereby the most deserving fighters are prioritized for title shots. You see, as champion, you're the king. But in order to maintain the position of king, you have to defend your crown. The fans don't want to see a king sitting pretty, taking on hand-picked opposition, because then we don't know whether the king actually deserves that crown, whether he actually deserves to sit in that throne. Perhaps he did a few years ago, but maybe he's not the same fighter now that he was a few years ago. So we want to see him constantly tested. At the end of the day, he's making loads of money being in that position. It's a very privileged position. It comes with great power, but it should also therefore come with great responsibility. There is just no credible reason for Canelo Alvarez to be allowed to fight 2 Charlo brothers back to back instead of facing David Benavidez. I mean, the Charlo brothers are not even in Canelo's division. One of them's at 154, the other's at 160. So look, I rate Canelo highly as a fighter. I think he's fantastic. Put on some great performances over the years. He's an all-time great, but fair is fair, and he needs to face David Benavidez. If he fights Jaime Munguia instead, again, that eliminates the excuse that Canelo comes out with that he doesn't fight fellow Mexicans. If he did fight Jaime Munguia, let's say it was next, I'd expect Canelo to win that fight. I wouldn't be at all surprised if he stopped Munguia. I know Munguia's apparently very tough, but he's never been hit by a puncher like Canelo. Not just the power, but the accuracy. So I suspect Canelo would either win a pretty convincing decision or stop Jaime Munguia sometime in the championship rounds. Or maybe even, let's say from the 9th round on, get a stoppage during that portion of the fight. So anyway, Munguia performed well against John Ryder. Ryder, long, tough career. He might want to look at packing it in if he doesn't have the hunger for it anymore. He has to make that decision for himself. He looked like he could still compete at some type of level with other contenders, maybe a little bit below Munguia, perhaps some British domestic fights. But again, if his heart isn't in it, then he probably should retire. Because once your heart is no longer in boxing and you're just doing it purely for the money, it becomes exponentially more dangerous for you. So anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments section below about Munguia's performance against Ryder, where both fighters go from here, whether Munguia's going to get that shot against Canelo Alvarez and whether you think he deserves it. and how you think that fight would go if it did happen. An alternative for Munguia, if he didn't get the Canelo fight anytime soon, would be a fight with Edgar Berlanga. That's a fight I actually really like. But for some reason, De La Hoya doesn't seem to want to go down that road. Because Eddie Hearn's been pushing for Berlanga Munguia. They're both on DAZN. It should be an easy fight to make, but somehow De La Hoya doesn't like that route. Maybe he just doesn't want to give Eddie Hearn a leg up. Maybe that's how he sees it. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Are you sick and tired of the mainstream mindset? Does the dogmatic conformity and pathological ignorance have you tearing your hair out in frustration? Then don't be alone. Come and join our brotherhood on Patreon. We stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. You'll gain access to my weekly topical podcast where we take more deep dives than Jacques Cousteau on an endless variety of subjects. There's also videos, interviews, live Q&As, as well as a vast back catalogue of previous episodes, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen via the Patreon app or download in high-quality MP3. Connect with myself and hundreds of other members in our Element chat group. There's no contract, no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a Mickey D's McMuffin. Just head to my Patreon page via the link below this video and select the tier called the Brotherhood of Reason. I'll see you over there.